Hello everyone, my name is Jason Davis and today I'll be talking about something I call the message in the words, communicating during crisis for a distributed workforce. As you all watch this, you're very likely still in the comfort or discomfort of your home offices. The work world is still very different from what it looked like in 2019. But over a year into this crisis, we're living through it. And today I'll be sharing some of the things I've learned about the importance of communication in a time when communication is both effortless and also still incredibly complicated. So let's really start off with why should we even care about communication? The answer is short and simple. For me, it's ultimately about engaging the team. A recent Gallup article called this the fixable problem, and it costs the U.S. businesses over $1 trillion per year. Gallup estimated that 22 million employees are actively disengaged, costing the economy as much as $350 billion per year in lost productivity. This includes absenteeism, illness, and other low morale issues. As far as what these employees are actually looking for, the trends are just very clear. It's an evolution from my paycheck to my purpose. And communication really serves as the basis of helping your team understand the purpose. So cause and effect are actually quite simple. Your ability to effectively communicate your value and purpose as an organization is one of the biggest levers you have to engage your team. And purpose really starts with the business and why you exist in the first place. What problem are you solving? And how are you driving value to your customers? What's your broader vision and mission? And what are the core values that will enable everyone individually and also collectively as a team to work together and drive towards these outcomes? The focus of my talk today is around communicating this sense of purpose. I've learned a ton over the past year around what works, and certainly also around what does not. Related, but certainly different from communicating to your team, is also how to communicate to your customers. And I'll be drawing on this as an analogy. As my business, Simon Data, this is our core focus. Whenever I think about team communications, I always reflect on some of the core principles in system design behind how we think about solving these core customer communication problems more broadly. Really framing it, it's sort of a three-step process that we bucket into three groups called listening, thinking, and speaking. And really it all starts with gathering data on your business, a mix of quantitative and qualitative data, and we call this listening. Second is the process of putting this in the context of the business, our strategy, values, missions, vision, and broader purpose. We call this thinking. And the final step is the act of doing, the actual communication, and that's the speaking. While speaking is the output, and when done well, it can define a clear sense of purpose and actions required to get there. But if done without care, if you don't do your homework first, then the results will fall on deaf ears and put you back relative to where you actually started. So let's start at the top, and really just focus on listening. I have a 6-year-old at home, and I always tell him probably every day that he needs to listen before he speaks. It feels really simple, right? But really not so much. And unfortunately for many of us, and certainly him included, what he ends up doing, pretty much 100% of the time, is just waiting for everyone else to stop talking before he opens his mouth and says whatever he originally wanted to say or to ask or to blurt out. And when I reflect on my experience as a leader, I've certainly found myself, too often ignoring the data that's in front of me. And good listening really starts with actually listening to the data in front of you. But beyond that, it also requires actively seeking out the avenues of information around what's actually happening on the ground, across the business, across your team, and across absolutely everyone. At my business, again, the basis of our value proposition actually starts with the notion of listening to your customers. Every day we process data on billions of customers across our clients, our broader client base, and this data is used as the core to drive highly personalized messaging that speaks to customers individually. Without getting into the specifics of how any of this works, listening is at the core of what we do, and the results speak for themselves as far as customer engagement and marketing ROI are concerned. And certainly listening to your customers mechanically is different from listening, to your team, structurally, and philosophically, it's not actually all that different. The sources are different, and the types of data are different as well. So let's get into that. Really the first bucket of data on your team is stuff I sort of refer to as table stakes across all businesses. Stuff that has always been there, it's always, it's there today, and it will always be there. This includes data from your performance reviews. This includes data around employee demographics, salary and compensation information, including recent salary and compensation adjustments. Data around historical retention metrics, year over year, what percent of the team is still here. Data from your exit interviews when people leave, and other things that are maintained and collected by your people or your HR team. There's a second class of data, around your business that I sort of characterize as this sort of next generation of digital employee data that's emerging. This includes employee surveys, reviews from Glassdoors, and also metrics around core communication systems. I'm not going to try to be exhaustive in this list, but as one example, Slack actually has some great analytics that describes how people use public versus private channels. I check this from time to time, and one of our core communication principles is to be transparent and open when possible. And looking at how the public versus private conversations changes over time for me is a signal around whether we're tracking towards that, and it's something that can help me really sort of piece together the broader puzzle. And then third, there are acts of listening and data collection that are really just responsive to organizational needs today. For example, Simon Data, my business, we just had our first DEI audit. We brought in someone from the outside, to come and run listening exercises with small groups that focus specifically on diversity, equity, and inclusion. As we know, these are critical to the health of our business and our team. And really this was tremendously successful. The group setting served as a safe space, where we're able to really, get folks' views on where we are, and where we're not, and really allowed, folks to really put out their opinions. And then finally, sort of the last data source, and last point of orientation rather, listening isn't always just getting in a room and asking questions. Sometimes it's actually just getting out of the way and to get the unvarnished truth, so that folks can step in with non-defensive insight and listen, with more informed, sensitive ears. And really, foundational to listening and data collection is trust. And developing this trust across your business is critical. And without this, people will just be reticent to share information. So let's move on to thinking. Once the data is in place, and once the listening happens, sort of thinking is step two. And really thinking starts with overlaying your data with your strategy. Is the business heading in the right direction? Do people understand our values? And are they holding themselves, accountable to them, and also others to them as well? And relative to what you're hearing, do folks understand their sense of purpose or not? And look, for every business, the answer to these questions is always a mix of some yeses and some nos. And as you hear these yeses, you'll want to celebrate them. And this is a part of effective communication, and really just building the culture. But really, the critical thinking needs to happen around the no's. And for each no, you should be asking the questions, some basic questions. Why are you off track? Who's affected, and is this consistent with what you're hearing? Say you're having problems around delivering, your product on time. And one question you might ask is, how does the data from your technical team support this? Do you have a management problem? Do you have a skills gap? Or are you trying to do more than you're actually resourced for? Let's sort of spend a few minutes. Just wanted to spend a few minutes unpacking this thinking process. So first, there's a problem of who in the segmentation. When you hear no's, sometimes this applies to everyone in the organization. But you really more often it actually doesn't. It'll be confined to a team, a specific population, or a specific group within the business. And it's critical to understand your cohorts. Is this an issue around old timers or folks who have just joined in the last 2, 4, or 6 months? And beyond this, there, from a diversity perspective, there are core segments that also just need attention. Segments around race, around gender, around ethnicity. And your segmentation should deeply consider this and also look more broadly around other vectors of inclusivity. One dimension that we focused on in my business specifically is this notion of extroverts versus introverts. How does your culture really how is your culture conducive to these two types of personalities, and how does this reflect what you're hearing across engagement and feedback across these two segments? The second problem, once you sort of understand the who and the segments and the cohorts, is really one of balancing the data with your understanding of the business. And this is what I really just call hypothesis-driven insights. The data doesn't tell you the answer, but it can confirm or reject what you understand and what you think is happening around the business. Of course, the other half, outside of looking back, is looking forward, in your thinking, and this ultimately comes down to speaking and communication. So speaking, much like with customer marketing, when I think about communications with my team, there are actually two modes. There's messaging to everyone, and there's also messaging to individuals. In the world of marketing, messaging to everyone is called brand marketing. You think about some of the world's best brands. Apple, which really has a brand around interface and design and usability. A brand like BMW, the ultimate driving machine. These are brands that are just predicated on single unifying factors that just everyone understands. And it's really not all that different, for your business and your employee value proposition. Really, messaging to everyone is how you convey what you stand for. What's your vision? What's your mission? What's your values? And if I'm going to commit to something as CEO that's designed to move us forward, relative to our values, it's critical that I communicate this to everyone in a public forum. We're all hear the same thing. You need to be clear with your team, and to the broader market for that matter, what you stand for as a business and where your North Star lies. For individualized messaging, on the other hand, the approach should be different. It's very much focused around course correcting and speaking to the journey that individuals and teams are taking as they further their careers and as they further their impact on the business. In a marketing context, this is relatively well understood, and it's called something. It actually has a name, which is called customer lifecycle marketing. Customers are at different stages, whether it be the first time buyers, or whether it be multi-time buyers who are brand evangelists and engage with the product and business every single day. But for employee communications, in your business, this starts with more specific goals that are individualized, team-based, or segment-based. You need to figure out the right form and then speak directly to folks in a way that provides motivation, as well as the requisite course-corrective actions to help them move to the next step in their journey. Let's talk about channels of communication. And yes, this is a tactic, but it really needs to be considered in the digital era. Hopefully, we'll be back in person before the end of the year. But until then, we're really looking at digital-only mediums. Email is a great medium for longer form, more detailed updates. Video or Zoom or video chat is good for more sensitive conversations. And actually in my business we make a policy of not recording our internal communications for this purpose explicitly. Slack is great and chat is great for transactional updates. And you also want to make sure you have some sort of corporate homepage or internal wiki for core information that includes value, strategy, and other sort of updates around around people and benefits and more. Now, some of you may be asking, which of these channels are the best, and actually others may be asking, hey, let's take a step back. We're talking about engagement and communications, but where does management fit, within all this? And the answer actually lies in one and the same. And the fact is, your managers are actually your best channel around communication. They're by far your highest point of leverage. As a leader, it's your job to empower your managers to make sure that they're having the right conversations. It's your job to make sure that they have the tools to think and listen and speak. The entire process I just went through should exist across multiple levels in the organization. This is not a top-down process that as a CEO or as an executive team or as a leadership team, you should run on your own. Everyone all the way down to the management level needs to be empowered and have the frameworks to listen, think, and speak in a way that adheres to some of the principles that that drive the business forward. When you're addressing big organizational changes or shifts in strategy, you need to look first to your managers as a way of making sure it lands and it's well received. Arm them with information. Communicate. Do your communication via public channels and email, or Zoom or video. And on the back of that, really make sure that your managers are successful in following up. In a recent strategy shift in my business, we actually had a series of meetings with management to take them through some of the changes we were making. We made sure that they understood these changes and asked questions. And then we actually put together a very detailed FAQ that we armed them with so that they could then go and answer and explain questions that arose after our public announcements. And finally, delivery is key. It's all about speaking with full context, and this needs to include the data you've collected, the thinking you've done, and a clear articulation of where everyone is heading. And don't forget, repetition is key. Tell folks you're thinking about doing something, then tell them once you decided to do something, and remind folks again and again that you're still doing it. So obviously this is not a one-time thing, and it's certainly not a process for only the most important communications. While the framework listen, think, speak may sound super simplistic and maybe even remedial, there's really no better time to test out a revisiting of the fundamentals than today. And thank you for your time.